During the Great Depression, cooks everywhere were forced to get resourceful, especially when making simple meals like sandwiches. Limited budgets and scarce resources sparked innovation in kitchens across America. Let me show you 25 forgotten poor man's sandwiches your grandparents ate to survive. Amid the economic hardships of the Great Depression, families often turned to humble ingredients hiding in their backyard gardens. One surprising sandwich, the radish and butter sandwich, combined thinly sliced radishes, easy-to-grow root vegetables thriving in even the poorest soil, with creamy butter, salt, and homemade bread. Despite its simplicity, this sandwich exemplified the era's remarkable ingenuity, transforming modest garden staples into a genuinely enjoyable meal. Radishes were incredibly affordable and grew rapidly, maturing within just 3 to 4 weeks, making them ideal for families in urgent need of sustenance. Butter, although a luxury in lean times, was often stretched sparingly, providing much-needed calories and flavor to otherwise plain sandwiches. Interestingly, radishes weren't always considered sandwich-worthy. Historically, they were seen as garnishes or mere rabbit food. Yet, necessity shifted this perception dramatically during the 1930s. Resourceful home cooks discovered that pairing crunchy radishes with salted butter masked the vegetable's peppery bite, turning a somewhat unpopular garden produce into something palatable, even delightful. In the bleak economic landscape of the 1930s, the trusty carrot, often abundant and dirt cheap, was quietly elevated from supporting actor in stews to star ingredient in sandwich spreads like the carrot marmalade sandwich. Homemade carrot marmalade spread generously over stale bread might sound peculiar today, but during the Great Depression, it showcased a brilliant combination of thriftiness and culinary creativity. When sugar became scarce and costly, innovative homemakers cleverly utilized carrots' natural sweetness, simmering them slowly into a thick, jammy preserve to mimic traditional fruit marmalade. Notably, carrots were among the most reliably available vegetables during the Depression. Their hardiness meant nearly anyone could cultivate a patch, even with limited gardening skills. Families often had surplus carrots, providing an ideal solution to the era's pervasive hunger. To avoid waste, stale bread, previously destined for the compost heap, was refreshed by this sweet and slightly tangy marmalade, transforming it into an unexpectedly pleasant treat. Despite its humble origins, carrot marmalade gained popularity, prompting home economists of the time to distribute official recipes for this vitamin-packed, budget-friendly spread. At a time when pantries were sparse, one modest vegetable quietly rose to culinary prominence, notably paired with vinegar to create the onion and vinegar sandwich. Thinly sliced onions marinated in tangy vinegar with just a pinch of sugar might sound like a questionable lunch choice today, but during the Great Depression, this humble sandwich was a household staple. Vinegar, cheaply produced and easily accessible, became an indispensable tool for Depression-era cooks trying to stretch limited ingredients into flavorful meals. Onions thrived effortlessly in backyard gardens, making them abundant even when money was scarce. But onions had another appeal. Their sharp bite helped mask the taste of stale bread, a constant companion during hard economic times. Home cooks discovered that marinating onions briefly in vinegar not only mellowed their pungency, but also produced a refreshingly tart flavor, transforming the simplest sandwich into a delicacy. Remarkably, onions were so valued that Depression-era food guides suggested planting them as an emergency food supply, alongside potatoes. This sandwich perfectly encapsulated the ingenuity of an era when resourcefulness wasn't merely admirable, but essential for survival. During the Great Depression, food scarcity pushed resourcefulness to new heights, turning even backyard weeds into life-saving nourishment. A prime example was the dandelion greens sandwich, made from tender, freshly foraged dandelion greens sautéed briefly in bacon drippings or butter, proving the old adage true: one person's weed is another person's lunch. Dandelions flourished freely, thriving on roadsides and lawns, offering a nutritious, vitamin-rich option readily available to anyone willing to forage. Interestingly, dandelions weren't always considered nuisances. Settlers historically cultivated them for their nutritional value, containing more iron and calcium than many grocery store greens today. During the Depression, families who knew this little fact relied heavily on these wild greens to fill nutritional gaps left by their otherwise sparse meals. With fats like butter or precious bacon drippings in short supply, home cooks learned to carefully ration these staples, just enough to tame the green's natural bitterness. Ironically, modern gardeners battle relentlessly against dandelions with chemicals and lawnmowers, unaware their ancestors would have gladly turned that lawn invasion into supper. Throughout the hardships of the Great Depression, creativity in the kitchen became as vital as bread itself, leading to culinary experiments that modern taste buds might find curious. Among these unusual creations was the humble yet surprisingly refreshing cucumber and sugar sandwich. Thinly sliced cucumbers lightly dusted with sugar, sandwiched between slices of bread. Sugar may seem extravagant for the 1930s, yet households often had small reserves carefully rationed for moments exactly like this, transforming bland cucumbers into something akin to dessert. Garden cucumbers, prolific and hardy, grew abundantly, becoming the unsung heroes of many Depression-era meals. Interestingly, cucumbers were favored because they matured rapidly, providing a dependable source of nutrition when pantry staples were uncertain. Clever homemakers discovered sprinkling sugar over cucumbers masked their watery blandness, turning a simple vegetable sandwich into an affordable treat. Even kids who usually avoided vegetables happily ate it. In fact, this unlikely pairing became popular enough to feature in homemaking pamphlets of the era, billed as a sweet sandwich children would actually finish. For American families battling tight budgets during the Great Depression, innovation became the true mother of necessity, especially when pairing unlikely pantry items like peanut butter and pickles. The peanut butter and pickle sandwich, featuring crunchy peanut butter generously layered alongside sliced dill pickles, was one clever response to empty cupboards. Peanut butter surged in popularity during the 1930s, partly because it provided inexpensive protein at a fraction of the cost of meat. Pickles, meanwhile, represented resourceful preservation, allowing frugal households to stretch cucumber harvests throughout the entire year. Combining these affordable staples, home cooks found the creamy, salty peanut butter balanced perfectly with the tangy bite of dill pickles, making an oddly delicious sandwich. Notably, newspapers of the Depression era often recommended peanut butter sandwiches precisely for their nutrition, calling them a poor man's steak, while pickles added zest, vitamins, and some much-needed crunch. Though today's diners might initially raise an eyebrow at this unusual duo, peanut butter and pickle sandwiches weren't considered oddities back then. In a time when food waste was practically unthinkable, even potato scraps found their way onto dinner tables as an ingenious sandwich filling known as the fried potato peel sandwich. During the Great Depression, resourcefulness wasn't just admired, it was essential for survival. Potato peels, typically discarded today without a second glance, became the surprise stars of family meals when frugal cooks discovered that frying them crisp and sprinkling a touch of salt transformed kitchen waste into an affordable delicacy. Potatoes were abundant, inexpensive, and nutritious, making them a cornerstone of Depression-era cooking. Yet their peels often held valuable nutrients, something homemakers recognized instinctively, long before modern nutritionists praised potato skins as vitamin-packed. Clever cooks stretched resources by saving these peelings, crisping them to crunchy perfection, and layering them between slices of bread for a sandwich that was satisfying, flavorful, and, importantly, dirt cheap. Remarkably, newspapers and food columns of the 1930s openly suggested frying potato peels to add bulk and nutrition to scarce diets, turning desperation into culinary inspiration. When times grew tough in Depression-era America, families turned to preserving foods, making homemade spreads like apple butter, a prized pantry staple. The apple butter and cheese sandwich, a modest pairing of homemade apple butter and thinly sliced cheese, became a favorite because it cleverly combined two readily available ingredients into a filling, flavorful meal. Apple butter, a concentrated sweet spread slowly simmered from bruised or imperfect apples, allowed families to make use of fruit that otherwise might have gone to waste. Apples were abundant and inexpensive during the fall harvest, so resourceful home cooks preserved them carefully to ensure supplies lasted through harsher winter months. Cheese, although slightly more precious, was often rationed in thin slices, stretching each small block to maximize meals without emptying the purse. Cookbooks of the 1930s praised apple butter sandwiches as a satisfying way to provide necessary calories cheaply, perhaps quietly suggesting they tasted better than some other thrift-driven concoctions. Back in the harsh realities of the Great Depression, families turned to pantry essentials that delivered calories and sweetness without breaking their limited budgets. Enter the humble yet hearty molasses sandwich. Thick molasses, generously drizzled onto slices of bread and occasionally sprinkled with salt, emerged as a popular lunchtime choice, not just out of necessity, but because it provided a rare moment of sweet indulgence during tough times. Molasses, a byproduct of sugar refining, was affordable and accessible, often stored in large tins kept in kitchen pantries, becoming as familiar as flour or potatoes. Resourceful Depression-era homemakers appreciated that molasses offered not only sweetness, but essential nutrients like iron, magnesium, and calcium, long before modern health experts rediscovered its hidden nutritional punch. To combat monotony, some households cleverly balanced the syrupy sweetness by adding a pinch of salt, creating a flavor combination intriguing enough to make molasses sandwiches feel like a treat rather than a compromise. In fact, molasses was such a dependable Depression staple that families jokingly called it their liquid gold, humorously acknowledging its value while dreaming of better days. In the 1930s, leftovers weren't something you tossed, they were tomorrow's lunch. That mentality gave birth to dishes like the cold baked bean sandwich, a Depression-era staple composed of leftover baked beans spread generously between bread slices. Though beans today might evoke images of summertime barbecues, in Depression kitchens, they symbolized frugality and survival. Beans were economical powerhouses, affordable, nutritious, and easy to cook in large batches. Families routinely simmered huge pots, using beans for multiple meals, stretching their budgets and pantries to their absolute limits. After hot bean suppers, resourceful homemakers cleverly repurposed any remnants, spreading them cold onto bread to create an easy, protein-rich sandwich for lunchboxes the next day. Newspapers of the period promoted beans as an essential pantry staple, boasting about their nutritional benefits and cost-effectiveness, while quietly ignoring their less glamorous qualities, perhaps for the best. Oddly enough, baked beans in sandwiches wasn't an entirely new idea. British households had long enjoyed bean buddies, proving thriftiness travels well. Corn has long been the reliable companion of American families, especially during the economic struggles of the 1930s. Frugality in the Depression-era kitchen meant nothing was wasted. Every spoonful mattered, leading to innovative dishes like the creamed corn sandwich. This sandwich featured leftover creamed corn thickened just enough to spread between slices of bread, transforming last night's side dish into today's main event. Corn was abundant, affordable, and deeply woven into American culinary heritage, so turning leftovers into sandwiches wasn't merely thrifty, it was practical culinary genius. Homemakers quickly realized that leftover creamed corn, thickened slightly with flour or stale breadcrumbs, could yield a surprisingly tasty sandwich spread. Creamed corn sandwiches became a clever way to feed large families without extra expense, all while sneaking in essential nutrients and fiber. Historical pamphlets even encouraged homemakers to use corn creatively, describing it humorously as the vegetable that kept giving, since families would see it repeatedly at meals, sometimes more than they wished. In Depression-era America, homemakers learned quickly that flavor often resided in the drippings left in their skillets. Bacon grease, now casually discarded, was prized as liquid gold, giving rise to imaginative dishes like the lettuce and bacon grease sandwich. At first glance, combining crisp lettuce with bacon drippings might seem contradictory, like ordering a diet soda with your large fries, but during the lean 1930s, it made perfect sense. Bacon, when affordable, provided protein, but every precious drop of rendered fat was meticulously saved in kitchen jars for future meals. Lettuce, on the other hand, was a garden-friendly crop, inexpensive and abundant, offering essential freshness and vitamins. Clever cooks of the time combined these humble ingredients, lightly dressing freshly picked lettuce leaves in warm bacon grease, sprinkling them with salt, then sandwiching them between bread slices. Surprisingly delicious, the grease transformed mundane lettuce into something savory and satisfying. Historical cookbooks and government-issued pamphlets frequently promoted bacon fat as an affordable seasoning, suggesting it could practically perform culinary miracles. Exotic fruits like bananas became virtually unattainable luxuries during the economic hardships of the 1930s, prompting desperate yet brilliant substitutions from ordinary American pantries. Enter the mock banana sandwich, cleverly disguising boiled mashed parsnips sweetened with sugar and a dash of artificial banana flavoring. Parsnips, previously overlooked root vegetables that thrived in backyard gardens, found unexpected stardom in this culinary sleight of hand. Housewives quickly realized their earthy taste softened when boiled, making them surprisingly receptive to imitation fruit flavors. Banana extract, once used sparingly in desserts, was suddenly celebrated for turning humble parsnips into a believable tropical treat. It's ironic that parsnips were elevated from root cellar obscurity to sandwich fame simply because real bananas became too costly for most American tables. Historical records show these sandwiches appeared regularly in Depression-era cookbooks, praised as creative alternatives that allowed families to maintain dietary variety despite limited budgets. Of course, modern taste buds might question whether parsnips truly captured the banana experience. After all, impersonating fruit is tough business. But many Depression-era children reportedly enjoyed the illusion enough to ask for seconds. When eggs became scarce during the Depression, Americans discovered a sandwich that cleverly defied logic: an eggless egg salad sandwich. At its heart, it was a crafty blend of crumbled tofu or leftover mashed potatoes combined with mustard, homemade mayonnaise substitutes, and chopped pickles. Though tofu may seem surprisingly trendy now, it had quietly existed in America since the late 1800s, mostly unnoticed until economic necessity thrust it into the spotlight. Families that couldn't access tofu creatively repurposed leftover mashed potatoes, turning yesterday's side dish into a satisfying sandwich filling. Depression-era homemakers found mustard's sharp bite and pickles' tanginess essential in creating the illusion of traditional egg salad flavor, ingeniously masking the absence of real eggs. Interestingly, mayonnaise substitutes, often a mixture of flour paste, vinegar, and seasoning, were promoted widely through government pamphlets and cooking columns as money-saving kitchen miracles. Food writers enthusiastically suggested these eggless spreads provided all of the flavor, none of the hen, helping families laugh through tough culinary adjustments. During the economic struggles of the 1930s, Americans learned to see value in even the humblest ingredients, leading to clever culinary combinations like the mustard and cabbage sandwich. Shredded raw cabbage tossed with spicy mustard transformed a simple vegetable into a crunchy, tangy filling that made eating on a budget more palatable, literally. Cabbage, inexpensive and incredibly durable, became a Depression-era favorite because it thrived in home gardens and could survive months in cool root cellars. Food guides frequently promoted cabbage as a cheap source of vitamins, humorously dubbing it poor man's medicine, though perhaps the medicine metaphor came partly from its powerful aroma. Pairing this everyday vegetable with mustard wasn't accidental. Spicy mustard, affordable and packed with flavor, had a unique talent for making bland foods suddenly appealing. Cookbooks of the era praised mustard as a versatile condiment, often highlighting its ability to rescue dull dishes. The pairing was smart, as the sharpness of mustard perfectly balanced the mild, crunchy cabbage. In Depression-era kitchens, nothing green escaped the resourceful eye of American homemakers, not even celery leaves, the unsung heroes at the top of the stalk. These leafy leftovers starred in the celery leaf sandwich, a sandwich created by chopping tender celery greens, lightly salting them, and buttering them generously between slices of bread. Today, most cooks casually discard celery leaves without a second thought. But during the 1930s, Throwing away anything edible felt as reckless as burning dollar bills. Celery itself was inexpensive and readily available, often grown at home or bought cheaply at markets. However, the leaves offered a frugal bonus, rich in nutrients and flavor. Savvy cooks of the Depression recognized celery leaves had a slightly peppery taste, perfect for transforming plain bread into something fresh-tasting and surprisingly elegant. Historical home economics columns humorously urged housewives never to waste celery leaves, suggesting that to do so would mean missing out on a luxury sandwich costing mere pennies. Indeed, celery leaf sandwiches earned a reputation as budget-friendly sophistication, making appearances at ladies' luncheons where no one dared reveal the secret ingredient came straight from vegetable trimmings. When grape jelly teamed up with bologna during the Depression, the combination created more than confusion. It birthed an unexpectedly beloved sandwich, the bologna and jelly sandwich. At first glance, pairing thinly sliced, inexpensive bologna meat with sweet grape jelly might seem like a culinary accident, but in the context of 1930s America, it was nothing short of brilliant ingenuity. Bologna was a Depression staple because it stretched meat budgets further than any cut of beef or pork ever could, appearing in kitchens nationwide as the quintessential poor man's steak. Similarly, grape jelly, often homemade from wild or backyard grapes, offered a cheap, sweet contrast readily available in most households. The salty, savory taste of bologna unexpectedly complemented jelly's sweetness, creating a sandwich quirky enough to please even skeptical palates. Interestingly, early cooking pamphlets and newspapers occasionally endorsed this odd pairing, promoting it as a practical yet flavorful way to diversify Depression-era diets. Far from being merely an oddity, this sandwich underscores how cleverly resourceful our grandparents were, turning modest ingredients into sandwiches both memorable and satisfying. Among the unlikely culinary heroes of the Great Depression was a sandwich featuring sliced tomatoes sprinkled lightly with sugar, the tomato and sugar sandwich. Tomatoes, easy to grow and abundant in backyard gardens, were embraced as a budget-friendly food staple during hard economic times. This sandwich cleverly paired the natural acidity of ripe tomatoes with a touch of sweetness, making them appealing enough even for skeptical children. Surprisingly, sugar, though carefully rationed, was frequently recommended in 1930s homemaking guides as a versatile flavor enhancer, transforming humble ingredients into tastier meals. Newspapers even promoted tomatoes as the perfect vegetable for cash-strapped families, humorously dubbing them poor man's oranges due to their vibrant color and juicy interior. Combining tomatoes and sugar wasn't just a quirky experiment, it was practical ingenuity. Sweetening tomatoes masked their tartness, giving them broader culinary appeal and preventing precious produce from going to waste. Modern taste buds might initially find the concept puzzling. After all, tomato sandwiches traditionally call for mayonnaise and salt, but Depression-era cooks weren't afraid to rewrite culinary rules if it meant saving pennies. In Depression-era kitchens, sorghum syrup quietly became a valuable pantry staple, sweetening life just enough to make tough days tolerable. The sorghum and butter sandwich, featuring rich sorghum syrup generously spread alongside butter, illustrated precisely how clever Depression cooks stretched limited resources into meals both comforting and economical. Sorghum, extracted from cane-like plants widely cultivated across the rural South and Midwest, was more affordable and easier to produce than refined sugar. Interestingly, families often pressed and boiled their own sorghum syrup at community gatherings, turning it into a social event where neighbors pooled resources and swapped stories, a rare, bright spot amid hardship. Butter, though pricier and rationed carefully, complemented the syrup's earthy sweetness, elevating plain bread into something genuinely indulgent. Historical cookbooks and agricultural pamphlets praised sorghum for its robust nutritional value, humorously labeling it nature's sweetest medicine, a tagline that perhaps oversold its virtues, but only slightly. Modern Americans might see the combination of syrup and butter as simply a makeshift dessert, yet to Depression families, it was an essential calorie boost, fueling long days of hard labor. Cornmeal, the affordable cornerstone of many Depression-era pantries, regularly transformed from bland porridge into crispy delights. One creative result was the cornmeal mush sandwich. a hearty sandwich featuring leftover cornmeal mush fried until crisp, then placed snugly between bread slices. Though today's diners might chuckle at the idea of mush becoming sandwich-worthy, during the Great Depression, cornmeal mush was more than an economical meal. It was practically survival food, providing necessary calories at minimal cost. Resourceful homemakers routinely prepared large batches, knowing the leftovers, once cooled and firm, could easily be sliced and fried for future meals. Historical newspapers frequently touted cornmeal as the American staple, humorously reassuring housewives they could count on cornmeal mush in lean times, even when neighbors proved less reliable. The cleverness came when leftover mush was fried, converting it from a monotonous dish into an appealing, crunchy patty that gave texture and flavor to humble sandwiches. In Depression-era kitchens, dessert leftovers found new life as inventive sandwich fillings, notably the sweet yet tangy vinegar pie filling sandwich. At first glance, the idea of vinegar pie itself might seem a culinary contradiction, but during the 1930s, it exemplified resourcefulness at its finest. Traditional fruits like apples or cherries grew scarce and pricey, compelling cooks to mimic their tart flavors using vinegar, sugar, and simple pantry staples. Homemakers discovered that leftover filling, sweet, tart, and silky, could transform plain bread slices into unexpectedly delightful sandwiches. Surprisingly, vinegar pie's popularity was well documented, featured regularly in women's magazines and cooking columns, praising the ingenuity behind making pies without fruit. Jokes circulated that vinegar pies were an acquired taste, but one gladly acquired when wallets stayed empty and stomachs demanded satisfaction. Beyond mere novelty, this filling cleverly balanced flavor profiles, providing sweetness from sugar and a satisfying tartness from vinegar, which together could fool the palate into tasting apples or lemons. During the lean years of the Depression, when even cheese was considered an extravagance, families creatively relied on homemade dairy products to fill their sandwiches. One humble yet nutritious example was the cottage cheese and chives sandwich. Freshly made cottage cheese blended simply with garden-grown chives, spread generously on bread. Cottage cheese was no supermarket luxury back then. Households routinely made it from leftover milk, turning spoilage into sustenance. Historical records show that cottage cheese soared in popularity precisely because frugal cooks realized spoiled milk could become a valuable protein source rather than being thrown away. To brighten its mild flavor, Depression-era cooks used freshly cut chives, easy-to-grow herbs flourishing freely in backyard gardens. Chives added a pleasant onion-like bite to the otherwise bland cheese, creating a sandwich filling that felt like culinary innovation despite its simplicity. Homemakers humorously boasted that cottage cheese was the ultimate Depression-era invention, milk that refused to quit. When Depression-era households craved ham sandwiches but found their wallets emptier than the pantry, cooks turned to an inventive stand-in: the mock ham sandwich, cleverly crafted from slices of canned luncheon meat, seasoned and fried to taste surprisingly like ham. Luncheon meat, an affordable, shelf-stable canned pork product, quickly became essential in kitchens during the economic struggles of the 1930s. Initially viewed skeptically, homemakers discovered that a little ingenuity with seasoning could convincingly transform canned meat into a delicious ham substitute, saving both pride and pennies. Seasoned lightly with brown sugar or cloves, then crisped in a skillet, this economical alternative provided families the illusion of a savory deli sandwich even when the nearest delicatessen was financially unreachable. Historical cookbooks and newspaper columns enthusiastically promoted luncheon meat as a reliable budget saver, humorously advising cooks to season liberally, since anything tastes better fried. Remarkably, luncheon meat surged in popularity during the Depression precisely because it was both accessible and adaptable, often distributed widely as government aid. Gardeners facing Depression-era hardship didn't toss away unripened tomatoes. Instead, they transformed them into simple yet surprisingly tasty sandwiches, notably the green tomato sandwich. Thinly sliced, salted green tomatoes carefully placed on buttered bread became a clever culinary solution to avoid waste when economic uncertainty made every vegetable precious. Green tomatoes were plentiful during the cooler months when fully ripe tomatoes weren't always achievable, ensuring these tangy, firm slices found their way onto many lunch plates. Remarkably, green tomatoes offered not only budget-friendly sustenance but valuable nutrients, including vitamin C, essential for families with limited access to fresh produce. Cooking columns from the 1930s enthusiastically endorsed green tomatoes as affordable, versatile pantry staples, though often jokingly acknowledging their tartness as an acquired taste. Resourceful homemakers cleverly balanced the tomatoes' acidity by spreading bread generously with butter, turning the sour slices into surprisingly palatable sandwiches. The green tomato sandwich is a vivid example of how necessity drove creativity in the kitchen, proving to skeptics everywhere that sometimes even unripe produce could shine brightly in a humble sandwich. In Depression-era kitchens, yesterday's breakfast porridge could become today's lunch sandwich, thanks to an inventive approach known as the oatmeal patty sandwich. Resourceful homemakers combined leftover oatmeal with chopped onion and simple seasonings, shaping them into patties fried crisp in skillets. While oatmeal today is primarily breakfast food, during the 1930s, it was promoted as an affordable pantry essential, stretching limited budgets due to its low cost and nutritional value. Housewives jokingly remarked oatmeal's versatility was unmatched. It could feed you at dawn, reappear at noon, and somehow still taste different each time. Historical cooking guides enthusiastically recommended oatmeal patties as mock meat alternatives, cleverly imitating sausage texture without the expense of actual meat. Adding onions, readily available from backyard gardens or root cellars, provided flavor and depth, elevating simple oatmeal from bland necessity into something surprisingly satisfying. Once crisped in a skillet, these patties became sandwich-ready, easily slipped between slices of bread and served hot, making oatmeal suddenly exciting, words rarely uttered together. Olives might not make a comeback anytime soon in today's world, but they will return on the list with egg and olive sandwiches. Like we said, olives were starting to get really hot as the ideal sandwich topping. Adaptable, flexible, and cheap is all you want out of an accessory to your sandwich. Like those fancy earrings that go perfect with your dress, olives and eggs went together like a Cupid-certified match made in heaven. People went wild around the mid-1970s for hard-boiled eggs and salted olives in their sandwich, green or black. Black olives got a bit more traction with eggs though, whereas greens synergized better with peanut butter. Would you ever try a sandwich that consists only of an egg and a fruit? By the way, you did know olives are fruits, right? So, this next sandwich is also typically made from only 3 ingredients, but it's still one of Grandma's most iconic creations. I'm talking about the infamous BLT sandwich. The name is an abbreviation for the ingredients: bacon, lettuce, and tomato. This sandwich was a summertime favorite, especially when tomatoes were at their ripest in Graham's garden. The BLT's roots can be traced back to tea sandwiches served in the late 19th century. But it wasn't until World War II when it gained popularity. During this time, supermarkets made bacon, lettuce, and tomatoes more widely available all year round, and Grandma made sure to use them up in the kitchen. A classic BLT is often made with mayonnaise, but some purists argue that the sandwich should be spread with butter instead. Well, it's still up for debate, so make sure to let us know your take on it in the comments. Corned beef tongue with mustard in between fluffy bread slices. Okay, beef tongue might be way out of your palate, but don't disregard the corned beef tongue sandwich just yet. For something to fade from history, it's got to cement its spot there first, right? Can't do that if you don't bring something to the table. Perhaps this one will bring a lot more than you'd expect. It's traditionally prepared with carrots, garlic, red pepper, black pepper, salt, onions, mayo, and spice like bell pepper, paprika, and some garnishes like lime and parsley. So we already have the makings of a savory delight. You really want to keep a close eye on the beef tongue while it's in the pot, though. It can alter the flavor or dry it out fast. Though this sandwich has faded into the past now, the intricacy and delicacy through which it was created is a marvel to look back at. Maybe one day, this sandwich will come back at fancy restaurants, but for now, it remains a figment of the past. Bologna and cheese sandwiches were sandwiches that you could pull out of the refrigerator and have nobody raising any eyebrows, only happy smiles and eager stomachs. Bologna spreads were not too popular in America until the 70s when they first properly started picking up some steam. People got on the bandwagon once bologna and pepperoni pizzas started becoming regular takeout options in states like New York and Chicago. If it works on a pizza by the laws of nature, it must be tried on a sandwich or burger too. We are not sure who came up with that rule of thumb, but they were really onto something, because this made for a great sandwich that was a meal people ate when all there was for dinner was sleep. While a lot of those cheeses and spreads got discontinued now, we would love to try an authentic sandwich from the 70s because it sounds right up our alley. Remember what chilly days at Graham's called for back in the day? If you guessed hot turkey sandwich, you're absolutely right. This sandwich was another one of Grandma's delicious ways of using up leftover turkey from Thanksgiving. This sandwich featured slices of tender turkey served hot, often open-faced, with a generous ladle of rich, savory gravy poured over the top. Sounds delicious, right? Grandma made her hot turkey sandwich special with the gravy. Whether she made it from scratch with turkey drippings or used a trusted recipe, the rich gravy soaked into the bread, making each bite juicy and flavorful. She knew that nothing went to waste, and the hot turkey sandwich was a delicious way to make the most of those leftovers. The bacon and peanut butter sandwich was one that caught our eyes the most. Crispy bacon paired with peanut butter sounded like a combination that could just work somehow. This was a no-brainer for Americans. If their left kidney is sustained by peanut butter, the right is sustained by bacon. Both together probably provide just the right amount of fuel to get through the day or a grueling 9-to-5 shift. A great condiment to go with this is unsweetened ketchup, because most ketchups today have artificial sweeteners. This isn't as popular as it used to be, but it hasn't declined enough in renown that it's that outlandish of an idea. Give it a try some weekend, you might be pleasantly surprised. Sautéed or caramelized onions provide just the right complementary flavor to the crispy bacon, while also not overloading your taste buds because of the peanut butter. Bologna and potato salad sandwiches were just as effective at getting the entire family on the table and doubling as the perfect school lunch for your kid. Grade 5 or high school, none of that mattered, because even adults well into their career enjoyed these. People working long jobs would pack a bologna and potato salad sandwich in their backpack to ensure all their food needs were met. Often you would come into a home around the afternoon and find kids glued to the TV with a bologna and potato salad sandwich in hand. Mixing in some chicken chunks or chips would only upgrade an already stellar dish, and we definitely want potato salads and this sandwich to make a comeback. If there's one sandwich you can never go wrong with, it's the old-fashioned grilled cheese sandwich. This one is the epitome of comfort food, and Grandma's version was a childhood favorite. Even the pickiest eaters used to beg for this one. So this one became popular during the Great Depression era, when we had to make do with 3 of the most common ingredients in our pantries: bread, cheese, and butter. Now, some of us used to get creative with our grilled cheese by adding extras like sliced tomatoes, ham, bacon, or even pickles. But this one was best enjoyed simple and plain. Oh, and let's not forget, it tastes even better when paired with a warm bowl of tomato soup. Before burgers and fries, grilled cheese and tomato soup used to be the ultimate food combo of our dreams. The best part? Most cheese sandwiches are vegetarian and can easily be made vegan by adjusting the type of cheese and oil. Cooked chicken livers mixed with onions and spices came together to create the chicken liver sandwich. Now, out of all the ones on the list, this one has probably stood the test of time the most rigidly. You'll still find it in the odd bistro or cafe here and there. Preparing it is a bit of work, but for those who want to expand their sandwich arsenal, this is a worthy addition. You'll need celery, red onions, curry powder, salt and pepper, and lettuce of your choice. Once you've mixed your meat with your vegetables and spices, it's time to get cooking in a 350-degree skillet and mix well. Once it's all ready, assemble your sandwich and see just why this was so popular around the 1940-1960s. Equally offensive to most conservative taste palates were pineapple and cheese sandwiches. As of 2024, it is a well-established fact that the West and pineapples have had a very troubled relationship. Pineapples try their best for America, and America acts like an alcoholic husband that cannot notice his wife even on their anniversary. Back in the 70s, this was still a new culinary ground people were treading, just like ham and banana sandwiches. What they found was that it did not have the potential to go very mainstream, but it could grow itself a strong, loyal, and niche following. Most fans of this sandwich were in Hawaii, but in surrounding states, the trend took off moderately successfully. People loved the overly sweet and oddly comforting sensation of the sandwich, and we can see why. Pineapple and cheese sandwiches sound oddly delicious if you really think about it. When it comes to sandwiches, only a few were as satisfying as the roast beef sandwich. So, many sandwiches were originally created as a clever way to repurpose leftovers, and this one was no exception. Roast beef sandwiches often started with leftovers from Sunday dinner. The Sunday roast was a time-honored tradition, and any extra beef was used to make delicious sandwiches for lunch the next day. In 1900, the dish was described by the Washington Post as unattractive and as a tired ark in a gravy flood. However, it gained popularity in the coming years when Grandma decided to take matters into her own hands, and by 1931, some critics even went as far as to describe it as a true taste of South Dakota. The bread for Grandma's roast beef sandwich was often homemade, and boy did she know how to dress it up. Whether it was a dollop of horseradish sauce, a spread of mustard, or a smear of mayonnaise, Gram knew exactly what it needed, and if we got lucky, she even snuck in a slice of cheese. The creamed corn sandwich was easy and quick to make. With just some creamed corn on buttered bread, you had a good lunch ready. Now, this used to be a lunch many people would pick for their long work days, but recently it has taken a nosedive in popularity. Of course, the vegan crowd still loves it as an alternative, but only a surprisingly 0.66% restaurants offer creamed corn sandwiches on their menus. Still, let's say you're trying to watch what you eat. Any better option than a creamy corn sandwich? Maybe, but you'd be hard-pressed to find one this easy to make. All you need is spices of your choice, some veggies like tomatoes and onions, or iceberg lettuce or slightly toasted cabbage, a good spreading of creamed corn, flat loaf bread, and you'll have this delicious sandwich that has now faded into the past. A sandwich that many do not even know exists. Most of the lovers of chicken salad and grape sandwiches dwindled a lot over the years, and now it is just a memory. No one does comfort food better than Americans, and the iconic potato chips and cheese sandwich is proof. People would grab cheddar or mozzarella cheese and a packet of Frito-Lays or a can of Pringles and get busy at the table but not in the kitchen. Reason being, this was one of those 10-minute dishes that took absolutely no effort or time to make, like instant noodles. Barbecue-flavored chips would be preferred, because they added a secondary flavor, but all kinds were used and the crunch was just to die for. In the 1970s, chips like Pringles were getting more and more popular in America, and that made it even easier for this to take center stage. What would follow in the decades after was a growing concern for health, and people stopped making their favorite potato chips and cheese sandwiches, but we would love a 70s plate. If you've ever walked the streets of downtown New York, I'm sure you're familiar with the infamous pastrami on rye. If your grandma's from the Big Apple, chances are her recipe is highly regarded. This sandwich became a staple in Jewish delis in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, thanks to Eastern European immigrants. This one just featured an old-fashioned slice of pastrami on rye bread and a dollop of mustard. Grandma knew that when it came to sandwiches, sometimes less is more, and pastrami on rye is the perfect example of that. But hey, don't forget no pastrami on rye is complete without a pickle on the side. The tartness of a dill pickle or the sweetness of a bread and butter pickle is the perfect contrast to the savory pastrami. A rather repulsive combo for some and appealing taste for others. The anchovy paste sandwich is a savory spread made from anchovy paste. This is less of a sandwich and more of a versatile condiment, but it does work extremely well on sandwiches, especially because the bread balances out the anchovy's taste. Historically, anchovy paste has always been used to give flavor and some pros to your health, but in the USA, it picked steam as a spread for sandwiches. You can spice this up with fried eggplants, tomatoes, chopped chicken chunks, a salad dressing, or anything you can imagine. This is one of those sandwiches where every time you try it, you can experiment. Spam and pineapple sandwiches, on the other hand, are a Hawaiian invention that makes some stomachs less audible. On the other hand, if you are anything like us, then maybe the blend of spices, fruits, and canned pork and ham will create a unique flavor trip for you. Spam and pineapple sandwiches in the state of Hawaii would usually be accompanied with things like mango slices or mango chutney, peppers, chili pastes, and fresh coleslaw. All of this really elevated the dish and gave it a strong identity to pull from when it was making impressions on people for the first time in the 70s, and most were good ones. While pineapples are eternally hated in America, this is one mix of different foods that a lot of citizens could get in line for, and that is why we are sad to see this one gone. The key to a good sandwich was in its simple ingredients, and Graham knew it better than anyone. That's why she whipped up the classic chicken salad sandwich anytime we craved some comfort food. Chicken salad has been a beloved dish in American homes since the mid-1800s. Grandma decided to make it into a hearty sandwich to make snack time better. Grandma's version of the chicken salad sandwich often included unique ingredients passed down through generations. Depending on where your grandma hails from, her chicken salad sandwich recipe might have a regional flair. In the South, you might find it spiced with a bit of mustard or pickle juice, while in New England, cranberries might be tossed in for a touch of tartness. Sliced bananas with mayo on white bread. This banana and mayonnaise sandwich is a bit of a wild card for sure, but keep an open mind because the South definitely does, which is where this interesting creation finds its origins. Typically, a lot of comfort food comes out of the southern USA. As you may have guessed, preparing this is as simple as taking candy from a toddler. Now I know what you're thinking. Bananas and mayo sounds worse than water and oil. However, there's a reason it comes into comfort food. All you need is a sliced banana, 2 slices of fresh bread, and a good spread of mayo. Maybe not the best you'll ever have, but what's the downside? Give this forgotten experiment a try and see if it's up your alley. Peanut butter and marshmallow fluff sandwiches, Liberty sandwiches, or fluffernutters, are basically just marshmallow cream on one bread and peanut butter on the other. Despite having like 3 legal government names, it is surprisingly a one-trick pony. But that one trick does wonders on an empty stomach, whether you needed a quick hit of sugar or a comfort snack to make the long shift pass by easier. These were just the sandwiches for the job. Fluffernutters also got really popular among children, and customizing them to make these cute aesthetic sandwiches was a popular hobby for kindergarten would-be chefs. Not something you would see on Hell's Kitchen, but something that puts a sweet smile on your day. Imagining the flavors is a bit difficult, so giving this certified beauty a shot is definitely on our list. One of the best descriptors we can offer is visualizing hot marshmallows dipped in peanut butter. And does that not sound just wonderful? The meatball sub is the kind of sandwich that's meant to be messy. The meatball sub has its origins in Italian-American cuisine. While meatballs are a traditional Italian dish, the meatball sub became popular in the U.S. as Italian immigrants put an American twist to it. We're talking juicy meatballs, marinara sauce topped with melted cheese on a long, crusty roll. Yeah, it doesn't really get more American than this. What makes or breaks this sandwich is the sauce, and Grandma knew it all too well. The sauce had to be the right balance of sweetness and acidity, and of course, the bread had to be sturdy enough to hold everything together. It's the kind of sandwich that you need 2 hands to eat, and maybe a napkin or 2, but it's worth every bite. It's a classic comfort food that never goes out of style. The scrapple sandwich is exactly what the name suggests: fried slices of scrapple on bread. Traditionally, this sandwich would be sliced and prepared in a skillet, under a thick layer of eggs. It definitely became popular around the Maryland to New York district, but the recipe itself is properly ancient. An 1853 extract from a cookbook advises using pork that wouldn't be suitable for sausage. It was also popular for its health benefits. It can be made in a variety of ways, and some people include crispy cabbage on top and make it into a waffle with mayo. Mix and match and see what works best for you. Maybe you'll find something worth sharing. But for now, the scrapple sandwich can only be something you create. With its popularity last seen in the mid-1850s, this sandwich is something that we can only find in old extracts now. You have not seen experimental until you have seen a tuna and apple sandwich. Exactly what it sounds like and worse in reality than in your imagination, a tuna salad mixed with chopped apple slices on white bread. Yes, that is literally the entire concept. And no matter what the fusion food crowd tries to say, we are not trying it or buying into the hype. If only to satisfy the curiosity inside us and scratch that must-try everything itch would we want this back. But strangely, people in the 70s had the opposite opinion. Cans of Pink Lady tuna and farmers market apples were apparently their idea of a good meal back then. Do you think they were onto something? Maybe we are jumping the gun and should take a note out of their book about being open to new tastes. Speaking of meaty sandwiches, the Turkey Club sandwich was another fan favorite. Now, this one was known for its 3 layers of bread, which made it stand out from the rest of the sandwiches on the table. The club sandwich has its roots in American culinary history, with some sources suggesting it was first served in private social clubs in the late 19th century. By the time Grandma was making them, it had already become the talk of the town. Graham often made this one the day after Thanksgiving when there was no shortage of leftover roast turkey in the refrigerator. The key ingredient in this sandwich was crispy bacon, which Graham added to make it kid-friendly and 10 times more delicious. Grandma's Turkey Club sandwich was often cut in quarters or halves, which made it easier to eat, and this was the first time sandwiches were cut diagonally. And remember the toothpicks Graham used to hold it together with colorful cellophane frills? Brings back memories, doesn't it? The mock ham salad sandwich was a popular sandwich that people chose to make when they had every ingredient but ham in their fridge. The sandwich was a perfect mix for when people had leftovers in the past. Using some mayo, boiled eggs, and pickles with the right seasoning was paired up with ingredients they scavenged from the back of their freezer to create a mock ham salad sandwich. The recipe was as simple as that, which made it a go-to sandwich for people looking to empty their fridge. As time passed, the need for having mock ham instead of real ham lowered. With less and less people creating this sandwich, like all the sandwiches on this list, it faded into history. But the simple nature of the recipe allowed for the method of making this sandwich to be preserved for future sandwich enthusiasts to see. Ham and banana sandwiches are less digestible both literally and figuratively than most of the list, but they actually worked quite well. The trick was in how you sliced them, because if the banana slices were fat and thick while the ham was thin, you would have a really overly sweet sandwich. Meanwhile, if you did the opposite, then you would have a mushy sandwich that did not have any real flavor. If you did get the proportions right, and most people did after their first few tries, then you had a 70s DIY delicacy with simple ingredients. It made sense why most people did not know how to make a good one, because it was not common. People who lived in other decades hated fruit and meat mixes of savory dishes, but they had a lot more room to make an impression with the crowd in the 70s. Maybe people felt very tropical for a decade? The sandwich would be quite an interesting addition in menus today. Liverwurst might not be everyone's cup of tea, but for those who loved it, there was nothing quite like a liverwurst sandwich. So, liverwurst, or liver sausage, has German roots and is a staple in many European countries. The name liverwurst comes from the German words Leber, which means liver, and Wurst, which means sausage. This one was also made with rye bread and was a common street food in the streets of New York. Grandma gave it a home-like feel by using homemade bread and using fresh veggies and toppings like mustard, pickles, or onions. Grandma knew that liverwurst sandwiches were a bit of a specialty, something that not everyone would appreciate. But for those who did, it was a real treat. The pimiento cheese sandwich is a southern classic made with a spread of grated cheese, mayonnaise, and pimientos, typically served on white bread. This sandwich was once a staple at luncheons and picnics, but has become less common in recent times. The peak its popularity was definitely during the 20th century, mostly as a homemade snack. The conventional prep would be pimiento peppers and cheese, soft or grilled, usually cream, spread across 2 loaves of bread. It declined as a go-to snack after WW2, but the South remembers favorably the delicious pimiento sandwiches their grandmothers would whip up. Does it get any nostalgia going for you? This sandwich definitely rings some bells in the minds of Southerners, though it's hard to find places offering to create this now-forgotten sandwich. Sardine and mustard sandwiches are as basic as they sound and much better than you might initially give them credit for. Be realistic and think about a post-Depression era America where a lot of neighborhoods and homes were still reeling from the effects. Dollars could buy a bit more and went back to their usual strength, but everything was a bit touch and go for a while, and dishes like sardine and mustard sandwiches were the cure. Even more attractive than the taste was the price of this beauty, because for about $1.50 you had yourself a solid meal. Many labor workers, like your friendly neighborhood forklift or dock workers, might remember eating these during their lunch breaks. People would usually spice it up with other vegetables, toppings, and peppers to make a proper feast out of a cheap thrill. And we would like to join the fun too. You can't have a conversation about classic grandma sandwiches without bringing up the egg salad sandwich. This sandwich started out as an economical way of using up extra eggs. Eggs were a budget-friendly protein source, and this sandwich with just a few ingredients from the pantry. This one also used mayo to bind the sandwich together, but some grandmas added a bit of mustard for a tangy kick. This was a post-Easter favorite, as after the holiday ended, there were plenty of hard-boiled eggs on hand, and of course Graham didn't let anything go to waste. You can make this one yourself with some store-bought egg salad, but it won't taste the same as it did back in the day. The head cheese sandwich in basic terms is just slices of head cheese, which is a cold cut made from meat from the head of a calf or pig on bread. If you'd rather not the head, then you can also use trimmings, and in terms of assembly, this resembles more of a charcuterie board than anything else. It's packed to the brim with vegetables, spices, and other aromatics. Though still, the entire head of an animal can be a bit of a daunting task for any chef. Once you've got your bread toasted and your spread spreaded, add your spices and vegetables and the hog's head cheese and assemble accordingly. If you actually manage to pull it off, this is definitely a vintage worth getting your hands dirtier than usual. Pickles come in pairs with olives, so it is only right to mention cream cheese and olive sandwiches next. Cream cheese was an ingredient that was already a staple in many American homes because of its popularity in desserts around the 1970s. Olives are, well, olives, and if you do not have a bottle always ready to go, you need to reevaluate your grocery shopping list for this month. Mixing the two made both substantially better, like those power-ups Iron Man gets whenever he puts on a bulkier suit. If people felt really fancy, they would put the olives on the stove for a while and have them fried. Not only was it great on its own, but people also did not stop at just frying. Both of them made for really awesome toppings on meat-based sandwiches. We would not mind seeing more olives on our plate today for sure. They are a classic we feel work in any era. As grim as the name might sound, peanut butter combined with mayo was quite a hit back in the day. In America, kids would often have this at 7 a.m. before school as breakfast they could easily put together. The sandwich was especially popular in the 30s to 60s as it was cheap and filling. Much like other sandwiches in the list, the peanut butter and mayo combination was also a product of the Great Depression. The mayo provided generous proteins that would pair well with fats from the peanut butter. In a time of financial instability, people found this sandwich to be a great way to ensure intake of important nutrients. As financial situations improved in America, this sandwich was replaced by newer and rather better tasting options. Cream cheese and jelly sandwiches continue the trend of sweet sandwiches that add a cheesy twist to give an extra kick to your taste buds. Often sprinkled with a bit of pepper and served on toasted bread, cream cheese and jelly sandwiches worked really well as a cheap but tasty snack. That cost-effectiveness helped them become more trendy in an America that was still suffering from the Great Depression and all the havoc it wreaked. People do not close your mind off to the idea too fast, since cream cheese and jelly was one combo no one saw coming but everyone hopped on. People would usually prefer strawberry or raspberry jelly, but some would also use blackberries. No one messed with the cheese though, and cheddar was the established pick for this sandwich in the 70s. Is this something you would try? Because we think it might be a surprise you like. Eggs. A bologna salad sandwich created with bologna mixed with pickles, onions, and mayonnaise certainly sounds like a good combo. There is some grim history attached to the sandwich though, as it may have been used as rations for military rations in World War II during times of meat shortages. The sandwich's recipe went through a lot of changes across the decades, but traditionally there would be diced bologna, mayo, celery, and some onions. These ingredients were cost-effective and could be rationed out easily. Hence, the bologna salad sandwich was a regular lunch option for many people at the time. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe. And don't forget to let us know your favorite sandwich in the comments below.